The call came in at 7:12 a.m., a frantic, splintered voice tearing through the morning calm of Crestwood Heights, Georgia, a place that sold itself on the very concept of calm. Detective Caleb "Cal" Freeman took a final bitter sip of his gas station coffee, the taste as gritty as the Atlanta streets he'd purposefully left behind a year ago. As his unmarked sedan crested the hill onto Magnolia Drive, the jarring contrast hit him, as it always did. This wasn't just a different neighborhood, it was a different planet. Manicured lawns, still defiantly green in the late autumn chill, rolled up to colonial houses with columns that looked like they were holding up a sky scrubbed clean of any imperfections. It was a silence bought and paid for, and to Cal, it was always more unnerving than the loudest city block. This was the Crestwood that appeared on postcards, not the one of cracked pavement and faded dreams where he'd grown up. He found the house easily. Number 214. It was the only one on the pristine street whose white facade was being violated by the frantic, repeating strobes of blue and red light. The lurid colors painted the perfectly trimmed hedges in shades of emergency. A uniformed officer, a kid named Miller, whose fresh face made Cal feel ancient, lifted the yellow tape. Detective Freeman, it's a bad one. The victim is Dr. Lena Holloway, the high school professor. Cal nodded, the name registering with a dull thud. He knew who she was. Everyone did. Dr. Holloway was a local icon, a success story the town's black community pointed to with pride. He pulled on a pair of latex gloves, the snap against his wrist a familiar ritual before stepping into chaos. The air inside was cool and smelled faintly of lemon polish and something else, a coppery metallic tang that clung to the back of his throat. The living room was a scene of calculated destruction. A tall mahogany bookshelf was toppled, its contents, thick volumes of literature and philosophy, spilled across a plush Persian rug like fallen soldiers. Cushions were ripped from the sofa, their stuffing peeking out. A side window near the grand piano was shattered, glass glittering on the polished hardwood floor like malicious diamonds. It was a performance, designed to scream, home invasion, robbery gone wrong. But Cal's gut, a finely tuned instrument honed over 15 years of seeing the worst of humanity, was already humming a different, more sinister tune. The victim was on the floor by the ornate marble fireplace. Dr. Lena Holloway, 44, a woman known for her intellect and grace, was now a tragedy sprawled in a cooling pool of her own blood. A dark, brutal wound haloed her head, a testament to a final, shocking violence. The weapon, a heavy marble bookend shaped like a rearing horse, lay nearby, its noble form grotesquely stained, as if the art itself had been complicit in the act. Cal's eyes swept the room, his training kicking in, forcing him to ignore the obvious and search for the contradictions. And they were everywhere, screaming silently. On the polished coffee table, miraculously untouched by the supposed mayhem, sat 2 wine glasses. One was nearly empty, a faint, perfect smudge of crimson lipstick on its rim. The other was 3/4 full of a deep red liquid. A panicked thief, a violent intruder, doesn't stop for a glass of Merlot with his victim. On Dr. Holloway's wrist, a delicate, expensive-looking gold watch still gleamed, its face cracked, but its value obvious. Her designer purse lay on a nearby chair, its contents spilled in a deliberate fan, but Cal could see the edge of a leather wallet that looked thick with cash. A desperate thief takes the watch. A desperate thief takes the cash. This wasn't desperation. This was rage. He walked over to the shattered window, crouching to examine the frame. The glass was on the inside of the house, consistent with a break-in. But outside, the perfectly trimmed azalea bushes beneath the window were pristine. Not a single broken branch, not a leaf out of place. The ground, soft and dark from an overnight rain, showed no footprints, no scuffs, nothing. The scene had been staged. It was a poorly directed play, and the director was the killer. Cal moved back inside, his eyes methodically scanning the floor, tracing the path from the front door to the body, then to the hallway leading deeper into the house. He was looking for the mistake. Every killer makes one. That's when he saw it. It was subtle, easily missed. Partially hidden by the deep blue edge of the Persian rug near the hallway, was a single, distinct impression in the carpet's deep pile. It wasn't a full print, but a partial one, the tread of a man's shoe, an athletic-style sole, and it was caked in a reddish clay-like mud that was completely alien to the dark, loamy soil of this manicured neighborhood. One print, one muddy footprint, pointing away from the body, not towards it from the window. It was the footprint of someone who had already been inside, someone who had stepped in something far from here and brought it into this sterile world with them. It was the footprint of someone who had tried but failed to hide their only mistake. The killer hadn't broken in. He had been invited, and he had left a ghost of a clue, a trace of another world, on the floor of this perfect silent house. The sterile fluorescent lights of Crestwood High School felt 1,000 miles and a different lifetime away from the quiet horror of Magnolia Drive. The school hallways buzzed with the low murmur of gossip, a current of fear and morbid curiosity running just beneath the surface of a normal Tuesday. The school's principal, a man named Arthur Pence, greeted Cal in an office that was more a shrine to himself than an administrative hub. Polished plaques and gleaming trophies for academic and athletic achievements lined every wall. Pence himself looked like he'd been polished, from his shiny shoes to his gelled hair, but his eyes were fraught with a panic that was all about damage control. A terrible, terrible tragedy, Pence repeated for the third time, his hands fluttering over a stack of papers on his oversized desk. Dr. Holloway was exemplary, a true asset to this institution. The press has been calling all morning. We need to handle this with the utmost sensitivity. I'm more interested in handling it with the utmost thoroughness, Cal said, his voice flat, cutting through the man's public relations speech. He sat opposite the desk, his presence feeling rough and out of place in the pristine office. Did she have any problems here, Mr. Pence? Conflicts with staff? Any issues with students or parents you were aware of? Pence hesitated, his gaze flickering towards a large, framed photo of the championship-winning basketball team. The movement was barely perceptible, but Cal registered it. Well, you know how it is in any workplace. High school is a pressure cooker. There are always minor disagreements, but nothing of note. Lena was the consummate professional. Cal leaned forward slightly, his patience wearing thin. The man was a walking, talking press release. Mr. Pence, a woman has been brutally murdered. Minor disagreements and consummate professionals don't help me. I need to know who she argued with, who she loved, who she feared. Anything. The principal cleared his throat, visibly uncomfortable. He adjusted his silk tie. There was a recent breakup. It was common knowledge among the staff, with Coach Finnegan, Sean Finnegan, our head basketball coach. He said the name with a mixture of reverence and caution. It was a bit messy, I heard. He's a very passionate man, very intense. It ended a couple of months ago. Cal made a note. Sean Finnegan, a star white coach dating a respected black professor in a town like Crestwood, was a power couple on the surface, but a complex dynamic underneath. A messy breakup added a clear motive. What about students? Cal pressed. Was she having trouble with anyone in particular? Absolutely not, Pence said, the denial coming too quickly. The students adored her. She was a mentor to many. Cal spent the next hour in the teacher's lounge, a cramped room that smelled of stale coffee and microwave popcorn. The story the other teachers told was of a woman who was brilliant and deeply respected, but also intensely private. They all agreed on one recent noticeable change. She seemed lighter these past few months, said a gray-haired history teacher, her voice low and somber. Happier? There was a glow about her. We all just figured she had someone new, someone special. But when Cal asked with whom, they all shook their heads. Lena never discussed her personal life. The real break came from the place Cal least expected it. He'd circled back to the precinct to formally interview the housekeeper, Maria Sanchez, a woman in her late 50s whose face was a mask of grief. She sat at a small cold table in an interview room, twisting a damp tissue in her hands. She was a good woman, Dr. Holloway, Maria whispered, her accent thick with sorrow. So kind. She was helping my daughter with her college essays, for free. Who does that? Maria, I need you to think very carefully, Cal said, his voice gentle. Did you notice anything unusual in the last few months? Any visitors you didn't recognize? Anything in the house that seemed out of place? Maria thought for a long moment, her brow furrowed. She was on her phone more, always, texting, And she would smile at the little screen, a secret smile, and there was something else. She lowered her voice, leaning closer as if sharing a dangerous secret. About a month ago, I was doing the laundry, in her personal hamper, in her bedroom. Under her clothes, I found a jersey. Cal's pen stopped moving. He looked up, his full attention on her. What kind of jersey? The school one? The basketball team? The Crestwood Ravens? 100 different theories began to race through Cal's mind. Was it a generic fan jersey, something she might have bought? No, detective, Maria said, looking him straight in the eye, her own gaze filled with a troubling certainty. It was a game jersey, worn. It smelled of sweat. It had a number on the back. Cal felt a cold knot form in the pit of his stomach. He knew where this was going, and he didn't like it. He asked the question, already dreading the answer. Do you remember the number, Maria? She nodded slowly, the memory vivid and disturbing. Yes, it was big in the school colors. Number 23. Cal didn't need to check the team roster. In a town that worshipped its high school sports heroes, everyone knew who wore number 23. It was the team's superstar, the phenom, the kid who was already being scouted by top-tier colleges. A 17-year-old boy named Jordan Maxwell. The jersey of a student, found hidden in the private laundry of his murdered teacher. The whispers in the hall had just become a roar. The cacophony of the gymnasium was a world unto itself. The relentless squeak of sneakers on polished wood, the rhythmic echoing thud of a basketball, the sharp blast of a coach's whistle. It was a symphony of youthful energy that felt jarringly, offensively normal. In the center of it all was Jordan Maxwell, number 23, a blur of blue and white. He moved with a fluid, almost poetic grace that was mesmerizing to watch. A natural athlete who seemed to think and react faster than anyone else on the court. He was tall, with a lean, powerful build, and carried himself with the easy confidence of a young king in his domain. But the moment he saw Cal Freeman walking down the bleachers, that fluid grace evaporated. His shoulders tensed, the ball slipped from his grasp for a split second, and the confident look in his eyes was replaced by a guarded, almost hunted expression. Cal waited for Coach Finnegan to call a water break, then approached the boy as he toweled sweat from his face. Jordan Maxwell, I'm Detective Freeman. I need to ask you a few questions about Dr. Holloway. The boy's face became an unreadable mask, a defense mechanism Cal had seen 1,000 times. I heard, he said, his voice low and devoid of emotion. It's messed up. She was your honors lit teacher, right? Yeah, he mumbled, taking a long pull from his water bottle. His eyes focused on a spot on the far wall. The conversation was clipped, sterile. Cal felt the invisible walls go up, the same walls that appeared whenever a uniform or a badge approached a young black man. It didn't matter that Cal's skin was the same color. His badge made him a potential threat, an agent of a system that was rarely on their side. Sources tell me you two were close, Cal said, watching for a reaction. Did she mentor you, help you with your writing, college applications? She was a good teacher, Jordan repeated, the words a stone wall. That's all? The denial was too quick, too sharp, too final. Cal changed tactics. He'd spent the morning with a forensics report on Lena Holloway's phone. The tech guys had bypassed the lock screen in under an hour, and what Cal found was a puzzle. I've been looking through Dr. Holloway's text messages, Jordan. She had a contact in her phone labeled JM. The conversations are interesting. A flicker of raw panic crossed Jordan's eyes before he ruthlessly suppressed it. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? Cal pressed, his voice even. The messages are full of quotes. Faulkner, Toni Morrison, James Baldwin, deep cuts. You'd quote a line from Go Tell It on the Mountain, and she'd reply with a line from Beloved. It was a code, a private language. Cal wasn't just guessing. He'd spent 2 painstaking hours with a laptop and a search engine deciphering the texts. They were a conversation hidden in plain sight, a series of literary references that, when strung together, painted a picture of a relationship that was far more than academic. It was intimate, secretive, and deeply personal. It spoke of shared secrets and a profound connection. She was just helping me with my writing, Jordan insisted, his voice tight with strain. For a scholarship essay. Is that what this was? Cal pulled out his own phone, the screen already displaying a screenshot of the last message sent from the contact JM to Lena, dated 10:14 p.m. on the night of the murder. It wasn't a literary quote. It was raw, desperate, and terrified. Let me read it to you. "We have to stop. This is getting too dangerous. He knows." Jordan stared at the screen, his breath catching in his throat. The carefully constructed mask of indifference shattered, the color drained from his face, leaving his skin ashen. In that moment, Cal saw not a suspect, but a terrified 17-year-old kid trapped in something far over his head. The walls he had built so carefully crumbled into dust, revealing the fear beneath. "Who knows, Jordan?" Cal pressed, his voice softer now, gentler. "Who is the he you were talking about?" The boy's eyes darted around the gym, a frantic, panicked search. They flickered towards the coach's office, then back to Cal, wide with a terror that was palpable. He shook his head violently, clamping his mouth shut. He was protecting someone, or, more likely, he was terrified of someone. Cal now had undeniable proof of the secret relationship, but that final cryptic message had just blown the case into 1,000 new pieces. It wasn't just a forbidden affair between a teacher and a student. It was a time bomb, and the message suggested that on the night of her death, someone, a dangerous, unnamed he, had finally lit the fuse. Sean Finnegan's office was a glass-walled perch overlooking the basketball court, a modern-day throne room from which he could survey his kingdom. He was exactly what Cal had expected, handsome in that rugged, all-American way that graced magazine covers, with a firm, confident handshake and an easy smile that didn't quite reach his cool blue eyes. His office was a meticulously curated shrine to his own success, covered in team photos, championship banners, and framed newspaper articles heralding his coaching genius. He projected an aura of complete and total control. "Detective, this is just devastating," Finnegan said, leaning back in his expensive leather chair. He gestured for Cal to sit, the perfect host even in the face of tragedy. He projected a carefully modulated grief. Lena was a remarkable woman, truly one of a kind, brilliant, beautiful. We had something special, you know. "I was told you two broke up a few months ago," Cal said, choosing to stand. He preferred to keep the power dynamic level. Finnegan's smile tightened just a fraction at the edges. "We did. It was amicable. The timing was just off. Our careers were demanding, moving in different directions. I wished her nothing but the best. I still cared for her deeply. Some staff members I spoke with described the breakup as messy. One used the word volatile." A flash of genuine irritation crossed Finnegan's face before he expertly smoothed it over with another charming smile. "People love to gossip, especially in a small town like this. Lena was under a lot of pressure. I was under a lot of pressure. Sometimes things get heated. It's life." He spoke with a dismissive wave of his hand, as if swatting away a fly. His condescension was subtle, but potent. When Cal asked about his relationship with Jordan Maxwell, his tone shifted again, a subtle patronization creeping in. "Jordan's a great kid, a phenomenal talent on the court, but he comes from a different world. The other side of the tracks, you know? Lena took a special interest in him, wanted to make sure he kept his grades up so he'd be eligible for a good scholarship. She had a real soft spot for kids like that." The way he said "kids like that" made Cal's jaw clench. It was the polite, coded language of Crestwood's elite, a verbal pat on the head that dripped with prejudice, separating us from them. Finnegan had an alibi for the night of the murder, and it was rock solid, untouchable. "I was at the annual Ravens Booster Club fundraiser at the Crestwood Country Club. I was the keynote speaker. It started at 6 p.m., and I didn't leave until well after 11. There were over 100 people there. The mayor, the superintendent, half the town council. Feel free to ask any of them." He offered up the names with an air of complete invulnerability. He knew, and Cal knew, that you couldn't crack an alibi witnessed by the most powerful people in town. The interview felt like a carefully constructed dead end. Finnegan was smooth, plausible, and protected by a wall of influence. Cal was walking out of the gym, the frustration mounting, a bitter taste in his mouth, when a quiet voice called his name. It was the school's athletic trainer, an older man named Dave Patterson, who was taping up an athlete's ankle near the locker room entrance. "Detective," he said, his voice low, not looking up from his work. You were asking about the coach. I was, Cal replied, stopping. Dave continued to wrap the ankle with practiced methodical movements. His eyes stayed down. About 2 months ago, right after him and Dr. Holloway split for good, I was here late, finishing up some paperwork. I heard a crash from the men's locker room, a loud one. I went in to check it out. He paused, carefully tearing the tape with his teeth. Coach Finnegan was in there alone. He'd punched a locker, not just punched it, dented the hell out of it. The metal was bent right in. His knuckles were all bloody and raw. When he saw me, he just stared, and this look in his eyes, it wasn't just anger, detective. It was rage, pure, terrifying, out-of-control rage. Dave finally looked up from his work, his expression serious, his gaze meeting Cal's. He pointed a finger at me and told me if I ever mentioned what I saw to a single soul, I wouldn't have a job to come back to. The man you just talked to in that glass office, the smiling, charming coach, that's not the real Sean Finnegan. That's just the one he shows the world. Cal thanked him and walked away, the pieces clicking into a darker, more disturbing picture. Finnegan's perfect alibi covered the estimated time of death, but the image of that quiet, hidden violence revealed a man capable of extreme brutality, a man whose calm exterior was a carefully maintained facade, and a man who, despite his breakup, might have been stalking Lena, watching her, his jealousy and possessiveness festering until it became something uncontrollable. The rage was there. He just needed the opportunity. The Maxwell house was on the other side of town, a geographical and social chasm away from Magnolia Drive. Here, the manicured lawns of Crestwood Heights gave way to cracked sidewalks, weathered siding, and chain-link fences. It was a small, tidy home, a testament to pride in the face of struggle, but the weariness of a long, uphill battle was etched into its peeling paint and sagging porch steps. Denise Maxwell opened the door, her face a portrait of exhaustion and defiance. Cal could see she was a woman who worked 2 jobs to keep her family afloat, and the fierce, protective love for her son was the first and most powerful thing he noticed about her. "My son didn't do anything," she said, before Cal could even introduce himself properly, her voice a low, firm challenge. She led him into a small, immaculately clean kitchen where they sat at a small table. A stack of bills on the table was held down by a salt shaker. "Ma'am, I'm just trying to understand what happened to Dr. Holloway," Cal said gently, sensing that aggression would only build her walls higher. "Jordan told me he was home with you on the night of the murder. Can you confirm that for me?" "He was here," she answered, her voice unwavering, her gaze locked on his. "He got home from practice around 6:30, ate the dinner I left for him, and went to his room to do his homework. He was in there all night." "Did you see him in his room all night?" Cal pressed, hating the question but needing the answer. "Did you speak with him?" Denise's eyes faltered for a fraction of a second, a tiny crack in her armor of certainty. "I heard his music playing. He always plays music when he studies. I was exhausted, detective. I fell asleep on the couch watching TV, but I would have heard him if he left. This old house groans every time you take a step. It was an alibi built on assumption, not fact. An alibi a prosecutor would shred in minutes. Cal knew he had to push harder, and he knew it was going to hurt. He carefully placed a clear evidence bag on the table between them. Inside, the blue and white Crestwood Ravens jersey, number 23, lay folded. Denise stared at it, her expression slowly crumbling, the defiance washed away, replaced by a deep, heartbreaking sorrow that seemed to age her 10 years in 10 seconds. "I knew," she whispered, her voice cracking as the fight went out of her. "I didn't want to believe it, but I knew." Tears welled in her eyes, tears of fear and helplessness, as she looked up at Cal. "A couple of months ago, I was looking for his insurance card in his backpack, and I saw the text on his phone, the way she talked to him, the way he talked to her, using lines from books, calling her Lena. It wasn't right. She was his teacher, a grown woman, 44 years old." The story poured out of her then, a torrent of fear and helplessness she had clearly been holding in for months. She had known about the secret relationship and had been terrified of the inevitable consequences. Not for the teacher, but for Jordan. His scholarship, his future, everything he and she had worked so hard for could be destroyed in a heartbeat by a scandal. "What did you do?" Cal asked softly, his heart aching for her impossible position. I went to see her, Denise confessed, her voice barely audible. Last week, I drove over to her house after my morning shift. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten her. I begged her. I sat in that same living room where you found her and I begged her to let my son go. I told her she was ruining his life, that whatever she thought this was, it would end with him being thrown away like trash while she'd just be seen as a woman who made a mistake. I told her, this world doesn't give second chances to boys that look like my Jordan. The confession hung in the air, heavy and damning. Denise Maxwell had a powerful motive, protecting her son from a relationship she saw as predatory and destructive. She had been to the house. She knew the layout. She hated what Lena Holloway was doing to her family. Her alibi for Jordan was weak, and her own was now in question. "Where were you on the night she died, Miss Maxwell?" Cal asked, the question a necessary cruelty. "I was at my second job," she said, her voice regaining a bit of its strength. "I clean offices at the industrial park downtown. I was there from 7 p.m. to midnight. My supervisor can confirm it." It was an alibi he'd have to check, but it wasn't the last of her revelations. As if a dam had broken, she let loose one more shocking detail. "Dr. Holloway, after I talked to her, she gave him money, a lot of money." Cal leaned forward, every instinct on high alert. "What are you talking about?" "The next day she met Jordan after school. She gave him a thick white envelope. He was confused, so he showed it to me. It had $5,000 in cash inside." Denise's eyes were wide with a bewilderment that mirrored Cal's own. She told him it was for an emergency. She said if things ever got bad, if he ever felt like he was in danger, he was to take that money, get on a bus, and just disappear. The detail was bizarre, inexplicable, and it shattered the simple narrative of a predatory teacher. A secret affair was one thing, but an envelope stuffed with getaway money was something else entirely. It wasn't the act of a manipulator trying to keep a boy silent. It felt like the desperate act of someone trying to save him. But save him from what? Or from whom? The leak came from inside the department. Cal knew it the moment he saw the headline splashed across the front page of the Crestwood Chronicle the next morning. It sat there, stark and damning, under a smiling, professional photo of Lena Holloway and a grainy shadowed basketball photo of Jordan. Tragedy at the Heights. Star athlete questioned in teacher's murder. The story itself was a masterclass in racial dog whistling and character assassination. It meticulously painted Lena as a respected community pillar and an award-winning educator, while Jordan was reduced to a troubled teen from a disadvantaged background. It mentioned his sealed juvenile record, a minor shoplifting charge from when he was 14, an act of stupid childhood rebellion, now recast as a portent of violent criminality. It hinted darkly at a close and potentially inappropriate relationship. In the court of public opinion, where facts were optional and prejudice was king, Jordan Maxwell was already halfway to a conviction. The pressure from upstairs was immediate and intense. Captain Frank Doyle, a man who saw policing through the murky lens of politics and public relations, called Cal into his office before he'd even had a chance to finish his first coffee. Doyle was a beefy man whose perpetually flushed face was a roadmap of high blood pressure and a constant state of agitation. "Cal, this thing is a powder keg and the fuse is lit," Doyle said, slapping the newspaper on his desk. The headline seemed to scream from the page. "The mayor's office has called 3 times this morning. The school board is in a full-blown panic. We need to get out ahead of this. We need to control the narrative." "My job is to find the truth, Captain, not to control a narrative," Cal shot back, his voice tight with a frustration he could no longer contain. "The truth is, we have a black kid from the wrong side of town mixed up with his dead, respected teacher, and the whole damn city is about to blow. I need a clean arrest. I need this to be over. The public needs to see we're doing something." The unspoken order hung in the air between them. Arrest Jordan Maxwell. Give the public the simple, ugly story they already wanted to believe. Cal felt the familiar rage bubble up inside him, the hot, bitter taste of injustice he'd been fighting his whole career. He was the department's only black detective, a fact the town's leadership loved to tout as a symbol of their progressiveness. But in moments like this, he knew he was just a tool, a black face to put on a racially charged arrest, to give it the veneer of legitimacy. That afternoon, the pressure found its supposed smoking gun, a call came into the precinct's anonymous tip line. The caller, a man with a gravelly voice who refused to give his name, claimed he was a delivery driver. He said he was driving past Magnolia Drive around 8 p.m. on the night of the murder and saw a beat-up dark green sedan, the same model and color as the Maxwell's family car, parked half a block from Lena Holloway's house. He said it looked suspicious. It was the piece of evidence Doyle had been praying for. "This is it. This corroborates everything," he declared, his face triumphant when Cal brought him the report. "The kid was there. His mother was lying to cover for him. It all fits. Bring him in." "It's an anonymous tip, Captain," Cal argued, his voice strained. "It's unverified. It could be anyone. It could be a complete lie designed to point us in the wrong direction. Or it could be a concerned citizen doing their civic duty," Doyle boomed, his mind already made up. "Get a warrant. Search that car. Search the house. Let's close this thing before the weekend." Cal left Doyle's office with a sinking feeling in the pit of his stomach. The case was being railroaded, driven by fear, prejudice, and political convenience. He knew in his gut that Jordan was more than a simple suspect, that the real story was infinitely more complex than a student-teacher affair gone wrong. The getaway money, the cryptic text message about him, the coach's hidden rage, it all pointed to something deeper, something far more sinister than what was being presented. He decided to check the tip himself before executing any warrants, a small act of defiance. He drove back to the Maxwell's neighborhood, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the cracked streets. He found the family's 10-year-old dark green sedan, not in the driveway, but in the backyard, up on cinder blocks, looking more like a permanent fixture than a vehicle. A thick layer of dust and fallen autumn leaves covered its hood. He knocked on the door, and Denise answered, her eyes even more weary than before. "Detective?" "Your car, Ms. Maxwell," Cal said, gesturing towards the backyard. "Does it run?" She gave a short, bitter laugh that was devoid of any humor. "The transmission went out 2 weeks ago. My brother-in-law was supposed to come look at it, but he hasn't had the time. That thing hasn't moved an inch, and it won't until I can scrape together $800 I don't have." Cal walked over to the derelict car. He placed a hand on the cold engine block. He scraped away some of the grime on the windshield and saw that the inspection sticker had expired 3 months ago. The car was a ghost. The anonymous tip wasn't just wrong. It was a deliberate, malicious lie, planted with surgical precision to frame a teenage boy. Someone wasn't just trying to cover their own tracks. They were actively building a case against Jordan Maxwell, steering the official investigation with calculated anonymous malice. The conspiracy of silence had just become an act of war. The debunked tip bought Cal time, but it also left him adrift in a sea of suspicion with no solid land in sight. The lie had exonerated Jordan from that specific piece of evidence, but it had also made Captain Doyle dig in his heels, convinced the boy was guilty, and his detective was chasing ghosts. The investigation was stalled, suffocating under the weight of public expectation and his captain's growing impatience. Cal spent a sleepless night staring at the crime scene photos spread across his dining room table. The image of Lena Holloway's violated living room burned into his mind. He kept coming back to the one detail that felt real, the one element that hadn't been staged, the mud on the carpet, the single partial print. It was the killer's only clear mistake. It was foreign soil brought into a sterile environment. Where did it come from? It wasn't the loamy, dark soil of the pristine lawns of Magnolia Drive. This was a reddish, clay-like mud, the kind you found in the undeveloped woods and creek beds on the edge of town. An idea began to form, a long shot born of desperation and instinct. The killer had been inside the house, but what if he had dropped or hidden something outside? What if the mud on his shoe wasn't just a clue to where he came from, but to where he went after the murder? The initial forensic sweep had focused on the immediate perimeter of the house and yard, the logical entry and exit points. But beyond the perfectly landscaped backyard was a thick stand of woods, a small 50-acre nature preserve that acted as a buffer between the wealthy neighborhood on the hill and the working-class one below. It was a perfect escape route, a perfect hiding place. The next morning, Cal went to Captain Doyle with the unorthodox request: "I want a K-9 unit back at the Holloway scene. I want to search the woods behind the property." Doyle looked at him as if he'd sprouted a second head. "Freeman, for Christ's sake, the scene has been processed and released for days. What are you going to find now? A stray dog? I have a hunch the killer went through those woods. It's the only place that red clay soil could have come from. If he dropped anything, a weapon, a piece of clothing, a good dog might find it. Doyle sighed, rubbing his temples in a theatrical display of exasperation. Fine. You get one shot, one dog, one handler, one afternoon. Don't make me look stupid, Cal. My neck is on the line with this thing, too. The K-9 handler who met Cal at the scene was a state trooper, a taciturn, no-nonsense woman named Evans, with a deep, quiet bond with her partner, a sleek Belgian Malinois named Kilo. The dog was a bundle of coiled energy, his intelligent eyes fixed on his handler, vibrating with the desire to work. Cal explained his theory, and Trooper Evans gave Kilo the scent command, using a sterile swab from the muddy footprint impression as a baseline. For the first 20 minutes, the search was fruitless. Kilo swept the backyard, the side of the house, the front lawn, showing little interest beyond the usual smells of the neighborhood. Cal's hope began to fade, the weight of Doyle's skepticism pressing down on him. Then, Evans led Kilo towards the tree line at the very back of the property. The dog's demeanor changed instantly. His nose went to the ground, his body tensed, and his tail went rigid. He let out a low whine and began pulling hard on the leash, dragging Evans past the manicured edge of the lawn and into the dense, overgrown woods. They followed the dog through thick underbrush and tangled vines, the ground beneath their feet turning soft and damp. The red clay Cal had been searching for now clung to his own shoes. Kilo was frantic, his excitement a palpable force. He moved with a purpose that was mesmerizing, his instincts taking over completely. He stopped abruptly in a small clearing, circling a particular spot near the base of an old, gnarled oak tree. He began digging furiously with his front paws, sending clumps of dirt and damp leaves flying, barking in sharp, insistent bursts that echoed through the quiet woods. Evans pulled him back gently. "He's got something, Detective. Strong alert. The scent is concentrated right here." Cal knelt down, his heart pounding with a mixture of hope and dread. The earth was soft, clearly disturbed recently. He pulled a pair of gloves from his pocket and began carefully scraping away the loose dirt. His fingers hit something hard and metallic just a few inches down. Working slowly, methodically, he excavated the object. It was a small tin lockbox, the kind used for petty cash, now rusted and caked in the same red mud from the crime scene. It was surprisingly heavy. With a click of his pocket knife, he forced the rusty latch. The lid creaked open, releasing a faint musty smell of damp earth and buried secrets. Inside, someone had tried to hide the truth, to bury it in the cold, dark ground where they thought no one would ever find it. The contents of the metal box were a ghost's confession, a voice from beyond the grave. Inside, nestled in a Ziploc bag to protect them from the damp earth, were two items: a cheap disposable burner phone and a thick stack of handwritten letters tied with a simple blue ribbon. Cal sat in the passenger seat of his car, the engine off, the quiet of the woods pressing in as he carefully untied the ribbon and began to read. The letters were from Lena Holloway, addressed to a sister in California she hadn't spoken to in years. It was clear they were never meant to be sent. They were a journal, a desperate unburdening of a soul in turmoil, and they methodically dismantled every assumption Cal had made about the case. The relationship with Jordan Maxwell wasn't a sordid, predatory affair. It was a desperate, high-stakes rescue mission. Lena's elegant, precise prose detailed how she had first noticed the subtle but unmistakable signs of abuse on her brightest and most promising student. A split lip he'd tried to pass off as a basketball injury, a faint yellowing bruise on his cheekbone he'd hidden with concealer, a pattern of absences on Mondays after long weekends, a telltale flinch whenever an adult's hand was raised too quickly in class. She had seen the shadows in his eyes and recognized them, writing with haunting clarity of a similar darkness in her own family's past. She had gained his trust slowly, patiently, over months of after-school writing sessions. And finally, he had confided in her. The monster in his life wasn't on the streets. It was in his home. His stepfather, Reggie Bishop, a man who was charming and well-liked in the community, was a violent, controlling tyrant behind closed doors. He ruled the house with an iron fist and a climate of fear. His abuse, both physical and psychological, was focused on Jordan. Reggie saw the boy not as a son, but as a future lottery ticket, a path to glory and riches through an NBA career. He controlled every aspect of Jordan's life, from his friends to his grades, and punished any perceived act of defiance with brutal beatings. The letters were a chilling chronicle of Lena's desperate, dangerous plan. She was using her own savings to help him. The $5,000 wasn't hush money, it was escape money. Her plan was for Jordan to use it to get on a bus and go live with an aunt in another state the moment he turned 18, just a few months away, freeing him from Reggie's control. She was helping Jordan secretly document the abuse, taking photos of his bruises, saving abusive text messages, preparing to go to Child Protective Services and the police. She knew she was risking her career, her reputation, and her safety to save a child nobody else would. The danger was a constant theme. "He watches me," one of the last letters read. "I see his truck parked down the street from the school sometimes. He just sits there. I think Reggie suspects something. He has a coldness in his eyes, a kind of dead calm that terrifies me more than any shouting ever could." Cal put the letters down, his hands trembling slightly with a mixture of anger and awe. He picked up the burner phone. It was a simple, untraceable device, used for only one purpose: communicating with Jordan without Reggie's knowledge. He powered it on. The battery was almost dead, but the screen flickered to life. There were only a few dozen messages, mostly logistical, times and places to meet discreetly to work on the escape plan. But the very last one, a text sent from Lena's phone at 7:54 p.m. on the evening she was murdered, was not to Jordan. It was to an unknown number, a number Cal would later trace to her sister, the one she never mailed the letters to. It was a final, desperate plea sent out into the void. Cal read it, a cold dread washing over him. "Reggie knows. He found my letters. He's on his way here. He's coming for me. Don't let him find Jordan. Tell him to run." The mystery of who he was, the sinister figure from Jordan's last text, had been solved. It wasn't the jealous ex-boyfriend or a rival for Lena's affection. It was the monster from Jordan's own home. Reggie Bishop hadn't just suspected that Lena was helping his stepson. He had found proof. And on the night of the murder, he had gone to Lena Holloway's house not to talk, but to permanently silence the only person who threatened to expose his reign of terror and take away the boy he so brutally controlled. Reggie Bishop was the picture of grieving blue-collar concern. When Cal and another detective, a veteran named Mike Rourke, arrived at his workplace, a sprawling, brightly lit distribution warehouse on the industrial edge of town, he greeted them with a furrowed brow and a solemn nod. He was a powerfully built man, his work shirt stretched tight across his broad shoulders and thick biceps, but his demeanor was calm, almost gentle. He played the part of the worried stepfather perfectly. "Detectives, anything I can do to help," he said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. He led them into a small, sterile break room that smelled of burnt coffee. "This whole thing with Jordan, it's a nightmare. The boy is heartbroken, won't even come out of his room. Dr. Holloway was so good to him, always pushing him to be his best. He was a good actor," Cal thought, "a damn good one. He had fooled an entire community." "Mr. Bishop, we just need to confirm your whereabouts on the night of the murder," Cal said, his voice a carefully neutral instrument. "It's just a routine part of the investigation, clearing everyone in the victim's circle." Reggie nodded thoughtfully, as if giving the question serious consideration. "Of course, I was right here. I worked the night shift, 6 p.m. to 4 a.m. I clocked in at 5:52 p.m., clocked out at 4:03 a.m. You can check the time cards with my supervisor. I was on the forklift on loading dock B all night. It was a busy one, never stopped moving. It was, on the surface, as airtight as Coach Finnegan's alibi at the country club. Company time cards were hard evidence. A busy loading dock meant multiple witnesses. But Cal had read Lena's last text. He knew this man's calm exterior was a carefully constructed mask hiding a violent core. "You're sure you were here the entire shift?" Rourke asked, playing his part. "You didn't step out for any reason?" A flicker of something, annoyance perhaps at being questioned, crossed Reggie's face before he concealed it. "It's a 10-hour shift, detective. I probably took a couple of smoke breaks out back, went to the vending machine, but I never left the property. We're not allowed to. They track the trucks with GPS. They'd know if I took one." Cal and Rourke spoke with the shift supervisor, a harried man named Henderson, who pulled up the digital time card records. They confirmed Reggie's story exactly. Clock in at 5:52 p.m., clock out at 4:03 a.m. Reggie's a solid worker, Henderson said, shrugging. Keeps to himself, but he always gets the job done. He was on the dock that night, just like always. We were slammed. The case had hit another brick wall. Cal had the motive, he had the victim's final damning text, but he had no way to break Reggie's seemingly perfect alibi. Without placing Reggie at the scene, the letters and the phone were just circumstantial evidence of a conflict. A defense attorney would paint Lena as a meddling teacher and Reggie as a concerned father. Back at the precinct, Cal stewed in a potent cocktail of frustration and certainty. He couldn't let it go. There had to be a flaw in the alibi, a crack in the facade. He pulled up the warehouse's schematics online, his eyes tracing the layout of the massive building. The main employee entrance, the loading docks, the vast parking lot. And then he saw it. At the far end of the building, listed on the plans as an emergency fire exit, was a single side door. It led to a small, concrete-padded employee smoking area, hidden from the view of the main lot and the security gate by a row of dumpsters. It wasn't an official entrance or exit, it was a blind spot. He immediately requested a warrant for the warehouse's security footage. "I need everything," he told the assistant DA. "Not just the main gates and the loading docks. I want every camera you've got, inside and out. Parking lots, hallways, everything." It took the rest of the day for the warrant to be approved, and for the company to hand over the massive data files. Cal and Rourke spent hours combing through the feeds, a tedious process of watching shadows move. The main cameras showed exactly what Reggie claimed, his pickup truck pulling into the lot before 6 p.m., him walking through the main entrance. The loading dock cameras showed him working on his forklift for the first half hour, but Cal fast-forwarded to the feed from a grainy, low-resolution camera aimed at the building's hidden side exit. A camera probably installed to catch employees taking unsanctioned breaks. And there it was, the crack in the perfect alibi. At 6:25 p.m., less than 30 minutes into his shift, the side door opened. Reggie Bishop, now wearing a dark hoodie he must have stashed in his locker instead of his bright yellow work shirt, slipped out into the darkness. He walked quickly, staying in the shadows of the dumpsters, and disappeared from the frame, heading towards his truck. For the next 3 hours, the camera showed nothing but an empty, dimly lit doorway. Then, at 9:48 p.m., he reappeared. He moved furtively, a predator returning to its lair. He looked around nervously before slipping back inside. His face, illuminated for a brief, damning second by an overhead security light, was pale and streaked with sweat. There was a dark, wet-looking smudge on the sleeve of his hoodie. He was agitated, his movements jerky and panicked, a stark contrast to the calm, steady man they had interviewed. Cal rewound the footage and watched it again, the timeline clicking perfectly, sickeningly into place. Reggie had clocked in, established his presence and his alibi, and then used the 3-hour gap to drive the 20 minutes to Lena Holloway's house, confront her, and kill her before returning to work as if nothing had happened. He had created the perfect alibi, but he hadn't counted on a forgotten security camera in a dark corner of the building and a detective who refused to give up. The devil's alibi had just been shattered. The arrest warrant was signed before dawn. The air in the precinct parking lot was cold and sharp, each breath a plume of white vapor. Cal stood before the assembled SWAT team, their faces grim and professional in the pre-dawn light. He laid it out for them, his voice low and intense. Reggie Bishop was not just a killer. He was a violent, controlling abuser whose entire world was collapsing. This wasn't going to be a simple knock and announce. This was a man with nothing left to lose. They had to assume he was armed, dangerous, and unpredictable. They rolled up to the Maxwell house on Elm Street in a silent convoy, just as the first gray light began to streak the eastern sky, turning the world from black to shades of charcoal. The working-class neighborhood was silent, its residents still asleep. 2 teams of black-clad officers moved like shadows to secure the back of the house, while Cal and the main entry team took positions on the front porch and lawn. The air was thick with a tense, coiled silence, the only sound the rustle of leaves skittering across the pavement. As the lead officer raised a gloved hand to knock, the front window curtains twitched. They'd been seen. "Crestwood PD! Reggie Bishop, open the door! We have a warrant!" The SWAT commander boomed, his voice shattering the morning calm. The only answer from inside was the sharp metallic sound of a deadbolt sliding home. A moment later, a panicked shout erupted from within the house. Denise Maxwell's voice, raw with terror. "No, Reggie, don't! Please!" Cal's blood ran cold. He wasn't just going to resist. He was taking his family hostage. The situation escalated in seconds from a high-risk warrant service to a critical barricade. A crisis negotiator was called in, setting up a command post in an armored vehicle down the street. The quiet suburban block was transformed into a tactical zone, cordoned off with yellow tape as sleepy, frightened neighbors peeked through their blinds at the unfolding drama. Inside that small, fragile house were a desperate killer, the woman who had tried to leave him, and the boy he had terrorized for years. The negotiators' initial attempts to make contact via bullhorn were met with stony silence. Cal stood by the command van, listening to the static, a knot of dread tightening in his stomach. He knew men like Reggie. Their entire identity was built on a foundation of control. Now that he'd lost it, his rage would be boundless and his actions unpredictable. He also knew that he, a black detective who understood the complex and toxic dynamics of that house better than any of the mostly white officers on the scene, might be the only one who could get through. "Let me talk to him," Cal said to the commander, a man named Peters. "Negative, Freeman. You're a witness and the lead investigator. You're too close to it. Let the negotiator do his job." "He knows who I am," Cal insisted, his voice urgent. "He sees me as the one who took everything from him. He thinks he's smarter than me. He'll see me as someone he can manipulate, and that will make him talk. Let me use that." After a tense debate over the radio with Captain Doyle, the commander reluctantly agreed. Cal was handed a tactical phone linked directly to the house's landline. It rang once before Reggie picked it up. "You've got a lot of nerve, Freeman." Reggie's voice was a low growl, vibrating with a barely suppressed fury. "It's over, Reggie," Cal said, consciously keeping his own voice steady, calm, betraying none of the adrenaline coursing through him. "There's no way out of this. You know that. Let Denise and Jordan go. They have nothing to do with this." "There's always a way out," Reggie spat. "They're my family. You're not taking my family from me." "They stopped being your family when you started using your fists on them," Cal said, taking a calculated gamble, making it personal. "I've known guys like you my whole life, Reggie. Big, tough men who are only brave when a woman or a kid is in the room and the doors are locked." A choked sob came from the background, then Reggie's furious roar. "Shut up!" Cal could hear the raw terror in the house, and he knew he had to end this quickly. He continued to talk, not as a cop reading from a script, but as someone who had seen this story play out too many times. He talked about control, about fear, about how this final act of violence wouldn't make him powerful, only pathetic and alone. For 20 agonizing minutes, they went back and forth. A psychological war waged over a phone line. Cal could hear Reggie's bravado beginning to crack, his rage giving way to a desperate, cornered animal panic. Then came the mistake Cal had been waiting for, the emotional break. "That bitch teacher!" Reggie suddenly screamed into the phone, his voice breaking with pure, undiluted hatred. "She was the one. She was trying to turn them against me, whispering in their ears, trying to steal my family. She got what she deserved. She got what was coming to her." It was a full confession, raw and spontaneous, broadcast over the police radio for the entire command post to hear. It was the last piece of the puzzle, the final nail in his coffin. In that moment of uncontrolled fury, as Reggie's guard dropped completely, Commander Peters gave the silent signal. The front door splintered inward as a battering ram smashed through it. Flashbang grenades rolled into the living room, exploding with a blinding flash and a deafening roar, filling the house with disorienting light and sound. Cal dropped the phone and ran toward the house, his own weapon drawn. Through the acrid smoke, he saw the SWAT team swarm over Reggie, who was struggling wildly, but was quickly overpowered and pinned to the floor. In the corner of the living room, Denise Maxwell was shielding a terrified Jordan, her arms wrapped around him like a human shield. Their long, private nightmare was finally, violently, over. In the aftermath, the truth, once buried in the cold Georgia clay and hidden behind suburban facades, came rushing to the surface. Reggie Bishop's shouted confession over the tactical phone, combined with the irrefutable evidence of Lena Holloway's letters and the burner phone, formed an ironclad case. Faced with the mountain of evidence and multiple witnesses to his confession, he accepted a plea deal to avoid the death penalty. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He would never see the outside of a prison cell again. The media narrative, which had been so quick and eager to condemn Jordan Maxwell, pivoted with a breathtaking, shameless speed. The headlines now screamed of "A hero teacher's secret mission to save abused teen," and "A mother's courage, a stepfather's betrayal." Jordan was no longer a troubled suspect. He was a tragic, resilient victim. The town of Crestwood, which had been ready to sacrifice him to its ugliest prejudices, now wrapped him in a smothering blanket of performative sympathy and charitable fundraisers. But the damage was done. The whispers would follow Jordan through the halls of his high school for the rest of his senior year. The public accusation, the stain of being linked to a murder, had left a permanent scar. His life had been saved by Lena Holloway's courage, but his innocence had been shattered by the very community that now claimed to celebrate him. The ripples of the case spread further. The athletic trainer's testimony about Coach Sean Finnegan's violent outburst, combined with the discovery of obsessive, borderline stalking texts to Lena on his personal phone, found during a follow-up investigation into his initial connection to the case, led to his immediate suspension. An internal school board inquiry was launched, and under the glare of public scrutiny, he quietly resigned. His perfect image was ruined, his celebrated career in Crestwood over. Justice, it turned out, had more than one target. A few weeks later, Cal sat in his quiet office, the final, thick report on the Lena Holloway case stamped closed on his desk. The case was over, the killer was behind bars, and the innocent had been cleared. It was a win by all objective measures of his profession. Yet, it didn't feel like a victory. He thought of Lena Holloway, a woman of incredible courage and intellect who had made a dangerous, ethically questionable choice for all the right reasons. She had stepped outside the proper channels, broken the rules, to save a child, and it had cost her her life. He thought of Jordan, a gifted boy forced to carry secrets no teenager should ever have to bear. His future now, an uncertain landscape of trauma, recovery, and the unwanted glare of public attention. He thought of Denise, a mother who had fought a silent, desperate war in her own home for years, and who now had to help her son pick up the pieces of a life that had been nearly destroyed. This case had never been a simple story of a forbidden affair. It was a dark and complex tapestry woven from the threads of domestic terror, insidious racial prejudice, the quiet heroism of an ordinary person, and the corrupting power of secrets. It was a stark reminder that the most dangerous monsters are often the ones who wear the most convincing masks, living in plain sight, protected by the assumptions and biases of the society around them. Cal looked out the window at the quiet streets of Crestwood, now returned to their placid, postcard-perfect state. Life would go on. The school would hire a new English teacher. The basketball team would get a new coach. But for the people at the heart of this tragedy, the wounds would be slow to heal, if they ever did. He closed the thick file, the central lesson of the case settling heavily in his mind. Justice isn't about clean wins and simple, satisfying truths. It's a messy, complicated, and often painful process of digging through the murky layers of human weakness, fear, jealousy, prejudice, and rage. And the most one could hope for, he realized, was not to erase the darkness, but simply to shine a light bright enough to let the truth, in all its painful, heartbreaking complexity, finally be seen.